Hi there, I'm Judy Holland, and welcome to Happy Nest, the podcast where you can hear the latest research and best advice for living well when your kids leave home. Join me as I interview experts and explore how to reinvent yourself during this critical passage. I hope you'll head over to judyhollandauthor.com and check out my new book, Happy Nest, Finding Fulfillment When Your Kids Leave Home. I'm here today with Laura Gassner Otting, a serial entrepreneur, philanthropic activist, and former White House political appointee. She has interviewed thousands of leaders at crisis points in their lives and their careers. Laura is also the author of Limitless, How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path, and Live Your Best Life. I'm here with Laura Gassner Otting today, author of Limitless, How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path, and Live Your Best Life. Laura and I, when we started talking, we weren't yet in the middle of this global crisis, but here we are. So now I'm going to slant our comments a little bit more toward where we are. Laura, in this time of uncertainty and crisis, how do we charge ahead and become the best versions of ourselves?
So it's an interesting question, and I've done a number of press interviews this week around this exact question. And here's my answer. We do exactly the same as we did before. You know when you're at your very best, when everything that you do, you are firing on all cylinders, and you're seeing through walls, and you're jumping over buildings. And we are called upon in this great global crisis right now to really dig in and serve the people that we love, show up for those people, show up for the causes that we care about. And the way we do that is every day we get up and we say, if I were the very best version of myself, what would I be doing today? And my challenge to people is not, in this time of uncertainty and crisis, how do I do it? My challenge to people is, how do I take this time of uncertainty and crisis and actually make that muscle memory and groove the pattern so that I could do that every day after this crisis is over too?
Wonderful. So there can be an upside. I don't like to return to the hackneyed silver lining thing, but what we need to do now is look toward the next phase and where we're going to be moving to, and maybe not just dwell in the moment like they teach me in my yoga class. So how do we motivate ourselves toward the future, motivate ourselves in a time, Laura, that is so frightening and uncertain?
You know, I've worked from home for the last 20 years. Before becoming an author and a speaker, I ran an executive search firm, and we were a quote unquote virtual firm. I literally had staff from Seattle to Siberia and everywhere in between. And this was back in the day before virtual firms working from home was even a thing. It was like the internet was still the wild, wild west. And I used to read all these articles about how to be productive working from home. And one of them said to eat the frog first, like do the thing first thing in the morning that you definitely don't want to do. And I say, screw the frog. Like, forget about the frog. F the frog. Think about what it is that you love to do. So tonight, when you're looking at the end of your day today, or tonight, when you're looking at your schedule for tomorrow, what is the thing that you're actually excited about? Is it reading an article? Is it watching a TED Talk? Is it reading a book? Is it communicating with a coworker? Maybe it's your workout. Maybe it's prepping dinner for that night. What is the thing that you're most excited about? Because that's going to be the thing in this time when, frankly, you could just reach over to your nightstand and get your laptop and start working. That's going to be the thing that actually gets you out of bed. So if you go and you do the thing that causes you joy, that's going to start momentum. That's going to get you working. It's not getting up. It's not getting the workout in. It's not taking the shower. It's not putting on the professional clothes. It's not eating the frog first. It's figuring out what you love and what causes you joy. That's going to be the thing that gives you the momentum that carries you into and through the day.
That's wonderful. So you're getting off, not to use a cliche, but you're getting off on the right foot. You're getting off in a positive tone. You're getting off with energy and excitement. And again, it's easier to get right out of bed and say, okay, I'm looking forward to this. I like that. I like that approach. I actually, when my kids would curse over one aspect or another of homework, I used to talk to them about actually what you're saying, not eating the frog first. Get warmed up on, if you love poetry, get warmed up on poetry, and the calculus can come later. So I'm completely on your page. That's fantastic. Laura, here we are in this totally bizarre time of social distancing and quarantining for some, which has which has had another effect of forcing many people to step back from their merry-go-round, full speed ahead, hamster on the wheel lives and spend more time, like it or not, in stillness. How can we turn this unexpected downtime, this stillness that's unanticipated, into something transformative?
It's funny because you mentioned yoga earlier and, meditation. And I think that there are people for whom yoga and meditation and sort of being in the moment is really helpful. I think there are also people for whom being in the moment is kind of terrifying and they want to just look ahead. And I think my answer is going to be different than your answer, is going to be different than every one of your listeners' answers. But for me, my answer is productivity. My answer is doing something that I'm going to be proud of. My mother survived the polio epidemic. She was about 8 years old when her sister was diagnosed with polio and ended up in an iron lung. And this was in a house where my grandfather had had a stroke when he was 40. So my grandmother needed to learn how to drive and go into, New York City every day and go help run his business. My grandfather had a factory that made coats for made buttons for the coats for big and tall men, right? If you have a big and tall man's coat, you have to have a little bit larger buttons or the buttons look weird. So she had to figure out how to do this. And then lo and behold, here comes polio. And all of a sudden her sister's in an iron lung. Oh. So my mother talks about that moment when her sister was diagnosed as the day that her childhood ended. And she talks about what it was like to live through that. And I was thinking to myself the other day that COVID-19 is really our polio right now. And there are going to be moments when I talk to my grandchildren, when my children talk to their children, and we talk about who we were in this moment, not what we did, not what our titles were, not how fancy our houses were, what kind of cars we drove, but who we were as individuals and who we were as a collective in this moment. And I think for each one of us, defining who you are to be the person that your future you is going to be really proud of will be different. So my advice to how you can turn this unexpected downtime into something transformative is think about 6 months from now, 6 years from now, 6 decades from now, will you be proud of the person who you were right now? Mm-hmm. Be that person right now.
That's fantastic. Well, let's talk about innovation. You and I spoke about innovation earlier. You mentioned that you think this is going to be a period of innovation in which there are going to be a lot of kind of revolutionary new solutions to things. I think a lot of people are starting over and there's going to be a serious impetus to begin new and innovate. Talk to me about innovation. What do you think's coming after the dust settles here?
So look, I work in the personal development space, which means that I am a peddler of unrepentant optimism and possibly naive idealism all the time. But it also means that I have an exceptionally good track record of talking people into crazy things they never thought they were capable of doing, things that seemed irrational when we first started talking about it, but from the finish line, they were like, oh yeah, that was in me all the time. I'm so proud that I lived into the person I could be. And I think that that's what we're going to see as a country and as a world. I think we're going to look back on this time and we're going to say, oh, okay, so everything had to change. We had to figure new things out. We finally figured out all those meetings that could have been emails, but also we figured out that maybe it's better for long-term health of our elderly to always have early hours that are just elderly only. Maybe we figured out that, all those small businesses that we thought depended on people visiting them, brick and mortar, could actually compete with the online, global companies, because the global companies, Amazon right now is distracted sending only the most urgent items. So if you order a book on Amazon, but your local bookstore down the street has figured out how to do home delivery finally. So I think that there is the rate of change, the speed at which we're understanding this virus and figuring out vaccines and being able to connect with people it is increasing every single day in this phenomenal way that I believe that we're going to look back on this time as as yes, it is terrible and it is tragic, and we're going to lose a lot of lives, and businesses are going to fall apart. I mean, there is not a lot of good news that is going to come out of this, but the good news that will come out of this is an incredible amount of innovation. That it's not the let's get back to normal after COVID-19. It's let's look forward to what the new normal might hold for us, and let's become part of that new normal as well.
Wonderful. That's great. That brings me back to Limitless, because maybe we will see unlimited innovations. Let's talk about your book for a minute. I'm interested in your story as to why you wrote this book. We all have various reasons. I wrote my Happiness, Finding Fulfillment When Your Kids Leave Home book because the last of my 3 kids left, and I'm a researcher and a writer, and I said, well, let me find out whatever every social scientist and therapist and all kinds of wise veteran parents around the country think. And so I dove in because that made sense to me. I had a personal need for that. What about you, Laura? Why did you write your book Limitless?
Oh, Judy, I think I'm just like you. I think everybody writes the book they need to have read. I need to have read this book. And I spent 20 years, as I mentioned, doing executive search. And I was paid by my clients to go out and find the smartest people, the most successful people doing what they were doing, and recruit them away to come work for my clients. I was paid to go find the best and the brightest. And that's why I was calling them. They, on the other hand, very super successful in what they were doing, were all picking up the phone when I called because they weren't that happy, right? So I was calling them because as a headhunter, I wanted to find the most successful people, but they were taking the calls because as a headhunter, they knew I could get them out of the job where they weren't that happy. And I was fascinated by the idea that success didn't always equal happiness. And then when that went on for 20 years of doing search. And then when I sold the company to the women who helped me grow it, build it and grow it, I had this sort of crisis of identity of who I was at that point. And I really sort of hit upon this idea that all these people in my life were telling me that, how could you have sold your company? You were so successful. You could have just ridden it into the sunset and been fine. Or, you should, go get a partnership at a venture capital firm, or you should do this, or you should do that. And everyone had an idea of what success would look like for me. But the truth is that none of their ideas of success really made any sense for me. And I realized that I was about to fall into that trap. I was about to walk down the same aisle and get married to the same success as I had done all throughout my career, when I knew that, going to law school meant success, and, all the things I was supposed to do, all the things that everybody told me would define success were success. And that's when I realized, oh, wait, there were a handful of people who I did interview throughout those 20 years who had both success and happiness. And what they had wasn't success as defined by everybody else. It was actually success as they defined themselves. And what I saw in that, and in the decisions that I had made throughout my life where I had both success and happiness, there were moments that I called moments of consonance, moments of alignment, moments of flow, when the what you do matches the who you are. So the book Limitless, How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path, and Live Your Best Life, is based around this idea that in order to have both success and happiness, you have to first ignore everybody and then carve your own path.
Right. No, that's great. Well, then tell me why do so many of us at different times in our lives let others define what success is? Why do many of us allow others to steer our paths based on their values or their priorities? I think we all fall victim to that, and I'm hoping you're going to tell me at some point you really were falling victim to that, because I certainly have years ago, not now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I had a 4th grade teacher who said, Laura, you're a pretty argumentative young lady. You should be a lawyer. And I, of course, told her she was wrong because I was argumentative. But then I set up an educational path that got me to law school, where on the very first day I looked around and I was like, I have made a huge mistake. I don't belong here. This is not the place for me. And, I can point to lots of decisions that I made throughout my professional life where I made choices based on other people's idea. And it starts off when we're 16, 17, 18 years old, when somebody says, pick a college, pick a major, pick a path, pick a trade. And we say, okay, and we do. And the problem when you're 16, 17, 18 years old is, what don't you have? A frontal lobe, right? You actually
Right.
don't have the part of your brain that enables you to make good decisions, good, sound, logical decisions. So we're asked to make a decision that is going to affect the rest of our lives when literally we do not have the capacity to make a good one. So it starts there. And then we go to college and we follow the path, and there's peer pressure, right? Everybody wants to get a job at, a big consulting firm or a big accounting firm, or they're going to law school or medical school, or they're, marrying their college sweetheart, or they're, everybody has the safe path. And so we follow that. And then we look back 10, 20 years and we say, okay, so I've got the success as I was told to have, right? I live in the right house, and I have the right car, and I have the right job, and I have the right salary, and I have the right spouse, and I send my kids to the right dance classes and all the rest of the things, capital the things. And yet I feel like there's something missing. Like, is this all there is? Is this all I was meant for? And then we're trapped in this kind of sunk cost fallacy idea, right? Where it's like, well, I just made partner, or I paid for that graduate school, or the kids are going to be out of the house soon enough. And, we sort of have this sense that, well, if I just wait it out, I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when the kids are gone. I'll be happy when I get the raise. I'll be happy when I retire. I'll be happy when my husband, my wife, whoever retires, and we can finally go, live in our wherever. And we have this sense. So it's, the first is, we don't have frontal lobes. The second is sunk cost. And then the third is what I call the four horsemen of the success apocalypse. The first of which is the I'll be happy when problem, right?
Right.
Which tells you that, like, I can't be happy now.
Right. I'll be happy when I have the right job, or when I'm famous, or when people know something. Lots of people hold me in high regard.
Right. So there's the I'll be happy when, then there's the work-life balance, like as if work is over there and life is over here and never the twain shall meet. I mean, every one of us is on some form of social media, and on that social media, every one of us is friends with somebody we know professionally. So work and life have already met. And I think this is an antiquated idea from like the 1960s or the 70s, when you could have church and state, but we don't have that now. So, we have people that are telling us, unless you have work-life balance, life's not good. And I work all the time. I love my work. I don't have work-life balance, but I have work-life alignment, right? What I do matches who I am, and I love it. Then there's the purpose question, right? Like, you clearly don't have purpose if you're not doing something of communal value for the world, the white hat, right? Higher, lofty purpose, as if purpose has to be Mother Teresa feeding the lepers in India. Well, I looked up purpose in the dictionary, and the definition of purpose is the reason for which something is done. That's it. So if your purpose is taking care of your family, if your purpose is curing cancer, if your purpose is building a company, if your purpose is buying a Maserati in a beach house, that's your purpose. That's it. It doesn't have to be anybody else's purpose. And we have to stop giving votes in our lives to people who shouldn't even have voices. And then the last one, like the last of the four horsemen of the success apocalypse, is my favorite, is that beautiful flaxen-haired, beach-curled goddess on Instagram who's looking out into the waves or the sunset or Coachella, and she's imploring us to follow our passion. Right. As if following your passion is the holy grail. Like, yeah, we all want to work on our passion. That would be amazing. But following your passion gives you the sense that the minute something goes wrong, the minute it gets hard, the minute you fail, it must not be your passion. So clearly it should be something else. And the truth is, we hear all the time this question of, tell me what you would do if you knew you wouldn't fail. That's your passion. And I think that's hooey. I say, tell me what you would do if you knew for sure you would fail, and yet you would still do it over and over and over until you got it right. Because isn't your passion worth that? So these are the things that we fall into. We don't know who we are. We look around, we see other people, seem to be happy. So if they're happy and they're doing these things, maybe we should do them too. And the truth is, that's everybody else's curated life. And we're judging our blooper reel by everyone else's highlights. And so the best way to do it is to stop in this wonderful, horrible moment of forced pause and say, what does success really mean for me? What would make me happy? It's not, I'll be happy when I have all the same things as everybody else. It's maybe I want different things than everybody else. And that's going to be pretty great.
Right. Well, so that leads me to ask the question. So, if we're looking for where our passion and our natural ability and our skills overlap in the big picture, I've had a number of people say to me that they don't know how to find their passions. They don't know how to look back, and I recommend that people look back to what they were naturally doing as a kid. I used to write little books and sew them together with yarn, and I did a lot of the things that I'm still doing now. What do you tell people who feel like they're rudderless when it comes to divining the right direction for themselves?
Yeah, so I just put together an online course that I'm going to be launching next week. And there's an exercise in the course where I ask people to do an intention inventory, to actually think about the things that they do. The best way to figure out what you want to do is to figure out what you do when you have a choice to do anything. And think about those activities. What do you naturally gravitate towards? And it may be that you can find a way to get paid to do that work, but more likely you're probably not going to get paid for like cozying up by the fire with your puppy and reading a book. However, you can look at that and you can say, well, what I do like to do is I'm endlessly curious. I like to research. I like to learn new things, right? Like I like to curate information. So maybe I should go into, library science, or maybe I should become a journalist, or, maybe I should, go into book editing, right? So there are things that you can do when you say, what do I do when I get to choose what I like to do? And maybe that can inform the things that you actually want to do.
Right. No, that's great. So how important I think I read somewhere in connection with you, the phrase mission driven. How important is it, Laura, to be mission driven?
So my first book is called Mission Driven, and it was about moving from corporate to nonprofit work. The executive search work that I did for 20 years was all for nonprofit organizations, universities, foundations, social service organizations, political advocacy groups. So I feel like I'm an unimpeachable source on the very controversial statement that I'm about to make. You do not have to be quote unquote mission driven to have purpose. Your mission is your mission. So I think it is very important to be mission driven, but I think when I say you don't have to be mission driven to have purpose, I mean mission driven in the way that everybody defines it. You have your own mission, right? So your mission is your mission. And as I mentioned earlier, if your mission is buying a Maserati and a beach house, that's cool. That's your mission. Everybody has their own. So in the book, Limitless, I talk about this idea of consonance, and consonance is made up of four things: calling, connection, contribution, and control. And calling is really the mission-driven piece. So calling is that gravitational force, that reason you get out of bed in the morning. And it might be to buy that Maserati. It might be to cure cancer. It might be to raise your family. It might be to build your business. It might be because there's an inspirational leader that you love to serve. It might be because you believe deeply in a brand or a company. Your purpose, your mission is just yours. And for some people, that is the most important aspect of the 4 C's of consonance. For others, they say, you know what, I don't actually really need to have that much of a mission, that much of a calling, that much of a purpose. What I really want is to just earn a lot of money. Or what I really want is the flexibility to be home at 6 o'clock every night because my kids are about to go off to college. Or what I really want is to be able to control what kinds of teams or, what clients that I worked with. But for everybody, they're going to weigh each of the 4 C's of consonance very differently. So calling is the first. And for most, they need to have some piece of that because it gives them a little bit of a beacon in the storm. But it's also okay if that's not the most important thing for you.
Right. Well, speaking of that, you just remind me of people being very judgy about other people's missions. People have their own missions, their own calling, their own feelings about the way they want to live in the world and what they think is right. How do we escape perceptions of others that our calling or our mission is inadequate? I mean, certainly there are many people that would argue that if you're aiming for 2 houses in the Hamptons and a Maserati, that's not the right mission, or it's not an altruistic mission. How do you, if that is your mission or your path or what makes you tick, how do you shake off perceptions and judginess of others?
Well, I would say this. I would say that there are going to be people in the world who judge you no matter what.
Right.
So I can tell you that if what your mission is to earn wages of poverty and give the shirt off your back to every homeless person on the street, there will be people who say, oh, isn't it a shame? If only she was smarter, if only she was more business savvy, if only she understood the economics of reality, she would be working somewhere else and making more money. Right? You're going to get it no matter which side of the equation you're on. So, there are people who make a ton of money, who donate a ton of money, and we call them philanthropists and we applaud them, right? And then there are people who sacrifice and eat ramen soup every day in order to, literally give the shirt off their back to other people. And we make fun of them for being naive. So I think there are going to be, no matter what you do, you will have people who love you and you will have people who hate you. And everybody's going to judge everybody else. I would love to say that I don't judge people, but I was a headhunter for 20 years. I got paid to judge people. That was my job. And I'm a Jewish mother. So it's like in my DNA, I'm like doubly tormented by this. So here's the thing. There will be people who do not approve of your choices. They're just not your people.
Right.
It's not that we can escape the judgment. The judgment's going to be there. It's kind of like right now with COVID-19. There are things about it we can control. There are things about it that we can't control. We cannot control how many people in our community, in our country, in our world have the disease. What we can control is staying home. What we can control is washing our hands. What we can control is sharing on social media news headlines that we've researched and fact checked versus things that we just put out there that are like panic porn. There are things we can control. We can check in on our loved ones. We can eat healthy food. We can get outside once a day and exercise 6 feet away from other people, so that if we get sick, we are as strong as we possibly can. And there are things we can't control. I can't control what the federal government is doing in response to this. I can't control what my governor is going to do. I can't control what my neighbor is going to do, but I can control what I'm going to do. In the same way, I can't control the judgment of other people. They're going to have that judgment. And 99% of the time, their judgment is about them and not about me. Right. So when I sold my company, I actually ran into a friend at Starbucks, and I had just told her about this incredible, difficult, just heart-wrenching experience of selling a professional services company as the founder. It is, there's like leaping over tall buildings, and then the next thing in terms of impossibility is selling a professional, a founder selling a professional services company. It was incredibly difficult. And I told her about the experience, and she said, well, what are you going to do now? And my response was, gee, I don't know. And she looked at me with a look that can only be described as sheer, unadulterated panic. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't know? And I said, I don't know. I mean, I got some cash from the sale, and that's great. And I think I'm going to explore a little bit. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. And she couldn't wrap her head around the fact that I had uncertainty, because she always knew me as the person who had a plan. Right. It was in charge. It was this badass who could get things done. And the fact that I was like, I don't know. Let's see. It was terrifying to her. And she looked at me and she's like, well, that doesn't sound smart. And her reaction had nothing to do with me. It was her reaction was all about, I don't think I could do it. I'm not sure if I could be comfortable with that. And I think so many times we take other people's judgment, other people's reaction at being about us, when really it's about them.
Right. We all look at things from a different perspective, a different point of view, and through a different prism. And people tolerate naturally different levels of uncertainty. Some of us, I'm one of them. I am completely comfortable with uncertainty. I think I kind of thrive on it. This pandemic, but I thrive on newness. And it's like if I pinch your arm long enough and you don't feel the pinch, then you'll just keep going. I think that's part of what journalism is. But one thing that I found, Lauren, it sounds like you've done it too virtually when you were creating your company, is one thing that I do when I jump into something new and uncertain is I make sure that I surround myself, and it may be virtually. In my case, I've got people from Singapore to Oklahoma to, all kinds of people that I've collected. In fact, I collected you too, who are doing things that are related to what I want to do or what I'm doing and who I admire for one reason or another. So I collect people, not to make a company or not to headhunt, but I collect them. I surround myself virtually, by the phone, just kind of sometimes even just intellectually, with people who excite me and bring me forward and stimulate me. It's sort of like I have to find my own tribe, my own community, people who, and in my case, it's often people who are writing things, interviewing people, researching, trying to push the envelope on new ideas and things like that. Again, that's how I found you, and it seems like you must be doing that too.
Yeah, I call those people my family. They're my combination of friends and family that really are. They're my cheering section. They're my maudlin squad. They're my fact checkers. They're my idea bouncers. They are the people. Look, the last time I lived in the same house as my parents, I didn't have that frontal lobe, right? So my parents, they could give me advice about the things that I'm doing right now, but they've been retired for a long time. They worked in a very different world. It was before the internet. There was they didn't live in the same world I did, because so their perspective of me and their perspective of the world, no matter how much they love me, is not as useful as somebody like you, who's a peer, who's going through the same thing, who is experiencing it in real time. And so my parents can give me a ton of wisdom and perspective from the years that they've been on earth, but that's not it. It is wonderful, but it's not complete. And so I need to have lots of people around me that become that support system. And the ones that really push me to do even more than I thought I could do. And I think, I love collecting interesting people. I often say that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And, I heard years ago that Jim Rohn quote, that you are the average of the 5 people you keep closest to you. And I think that is absolutely dead on. But then a few weeks ago, I heard another quote by Coach John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach. And this was a quote that really brought into stark relief for me. He said, "You will never outperform your inner circle." And I thought, that's real, right? If you will never outperform your inner circle. So your inner circle has to be people that are supportive. They have to be people that you support. And there have to be some aspirational people in there as well. People that are just a couple steps ahead of you too.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. So you, Laura, wrapping up, you've coached many people through career change. How would you collect all that information and wisdom and experience that you've had over the years doing that and coach us through these very uncertain times? Everywhere I go, I see expressions walking around Washington under the cherry blossoms and with people trying to get 6-8 feet apart from each other and looking worried. There's such a feeling of upset. What words of wisdom do you have? How do you coach them? This isn't, for many people, it will be a career change. It's going to be a new business. It's going to be, once we get through this. What are your words to our listeners?
So, it's a big question. If I may, I'd like to give 2 answers.
Sure.
The first answer is, if you are in a current stable job, do not change jobs right now. Stay where you are. Even if you hate it, even if it is sucking the soul out of you,
take it.
Just stay in it right now for the next 6 months, 12 months. Let's just ride it out, because it is very uncertain times. However, there are things that you can do right now so that you can be ready when the world normalizes and unemployment isn't at 30% and we get back to, opportunity and streets paved with gold and go America. And I call those things side quests. And so if you think about your basic video game, and if the goal of the video game is to go to the castle and slay the dragon and save the princess, but you can't go yet because you're playing the game with a bunch of other friends and they haven't logged online, there are things that you can do. I learned this from my 17-year-old who was waiting for his other friends to finish the after dinner dishes before they logged on. He told me about this. There are things you can do. You're a farmer, so you can till your wheat. You can take it to the market. You can get some money in exchange for that wheat. And with that money, you can buy a horse and a sword and a potion, so that when your friends do finally log online, when the economy finally does return back to normal, you can go to the castle, you can slay the dragon and you can save the princess. So what are those side quests? There are things like listening to wonderful podcasts like this. There are things like reading Happiness or reading Limitless or other great books. You can take my quiz at limitlessassessment.com and figure out your own personal brand of consonants. You can watch TED Talks. You can read books. You can set up informational interviews by Zoom. There are tons of things you can do right now as side quests that will help you so that when it is time to jump on that horse, you're ready to go and slay the dragon and save the princess. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I would ask people to think about who they are in their fundamental state of leadership. When this is a Harvard Business Review concept, your fundamental state of leadership is who you are when you're at your very best, when you're firing at all cylinders, you're making it rain. Maybe it's public, maybe it's private, maybe it's loud, maybe it's quiet. The moment where you are at your very best. And think about who you are in those moments. What kind of energy are you using? What's the lexicon you're speaking? Are you with people? Are you alone? Is it creative? Is it pragmatic? What are the things that you're doing? And write down a list of those adjectives that describe who you are in that moment. And then think about how you can spend more time during this time living into being that person all the time. Because the more that you can groove the pattern and energize yourself around being that very best version of you, the more that you're going to show up in this crisis like that. And the person you are in this crisis is going to be the person you are after this crisis.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'm so much appreciate our new friendship. I found you, and I'm so glad I found you on the internet, and we've had so interested in your ideas, and I think your ideas and your potential is also limitless, and just like your book. So thank you so much, Laura, for coming on and helping to enlighten and entertain our happiness listeners today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad you found me too. I'm so glad to be part of the happiness tribe.
Thanks for tuning into my Happiness podcast, where we explore how to get the best out of the empty nest. I hope you'll subscribe, write a review, and reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Check out my website, judyhollandauthor.com. Have a great day, and remember, make it happen.